Hello, good morning, good evening, and good afternoon, and wherever you are listening in this wide, wonderful, beautiful world that we live in right now. So, you're very welcome to this very special episode of the Mindful Leadership Podcast. I'm your host, Jason Cooper. I'm a sales strategist, sales coach, but I deal in how to build better relationships with your clients and your customers and how you need to do that for now and in the future, because this exceeds what you do on a day-to-day basis. That connection between two people, that connection between the company, really impactful. So today is all about insightful leaders, insightful leadership, and gifted leaders that employ beautiful and brilliant and unusual strategies for great effect. And today, without further ado, I've got Hilary McLellan. Is that how you pronounce your surname?
McLellan. It's
McLellan. My eyesight's not as good as it should be. I've only worn these glasses for 2 or 3 months, and I'm still getting used to it, so I can't focus onto the screen. So you're welcome. Thank you so much for coming on today. Tell me how you got into what you're doing, and before we do that, actually, I better give you a bit of an insight of who you are, Hilary. So you're Cambridgeshire-based organizational behavioral executive coach, over 25 years of senior HR and L&D for anyone else out there as learning and development roles in public and private sectors, UK and global. So an expert in emotional intelligence, resilience, psychology, safety, compassion, focusing, coaching, set up in 2015. So I'm really interested in that, but I'm also interested in how you work with your daughter as well. And you've got other accolades under your belt. So really, thank you so much, Hilary. Tell me more about you.
Oh, bless you, Jason. Thank you. It's lovely to be here. So, well, I didn't really start out with an education, so it still feels slightly humbling to hear you say accolades, because actually I went to full-time ballet school, so I didn't ever get any exams. And then at 16, I was told I was too tall to dance. So hey ho, I learned to type, and that was that was kind of my way forward for many years, just copy typing. I did eventually fall into business, and specifically in human resources, personnel, as it was called, and that was really captured my imagination. I loved working with people. I loved doing what felt like looking after their best interests. But in 2008, at the point of the last recession, it didn't feel like such a positive place, because I was leading a year's worth of redundancy program. And when you get the nickname the Angel of Death whenever you turn up at a reception of one of your divisions, that wasn't a career high for me. So I made the decision at that point that while it was fabulous, ticking all the employment law boxes, and quite rightly so, that I actually was more interested in how people felt at work. Because while I was being applauded for having no employment tribunal claims, it was a case of, well, just look around you. You know, there's no trust, there's no motivation, there's very little engagement. And actually, if you want any bang for your buck in this organisation, people are going to be very reticent in what they give for the next 6 months to a year. So that's kind of how I ended up flipping careers, going off doing a master's, rebranding really, and starting over.
Oh, that's really good, and that's probably similar to me, because when I left school, I wasn't really enthusiastic by that. It's only in my later career that I love learning now, and I just can't wait to read my next book or my podcast or listen to something that adds value forward. So, what are the areas that you specialize in, and how do you add value back into organizations?
Oh, what a lovely question. So the areas I specialise in are resilience, emotional intelligence, psychological safety, and compassionate leadership. And I add value because it's well documented and researched that the nature of business is less about what you know. It's less about the IQ now, way more about the relationships you build and the trust you bring. So, and the higher you go, the more important that is. And yet I find I go along to coach someone who's just new into an MD role, and they're still grappling with the fact they have to let go of the doing, and try and grasp this a sort of ethereal thing of influence and leadership. And, you know, and they can't kind of grasp it when they're used to knowing the answers and doing the doing.
Yeah, and especially now when people are a little bit more remote and they're not probably sitting next to the team, the organization, and they can't pull people into the office the way that they used to. So what do you think are the key elements now into successful leadership, and how can they better use the resilience, but also that magic T, which is trust and respect and authority and all of that sort of the Cialdini influence persuasion, but also to do it in a practical way? And especially now we're in this funny world that we're in.
Oh, yeah. Well, it is a whole other bag, isn't it? When you can only really see a head and shoulders and you're losing all the non-verbal communication. And when I'm coaching people in this world, I try and really strip it down to making them think about themselves as mammals, and the fact that as mammals, we absolutely rely on eye contact and whatever body language we can bring in this tiny screen. It would be like a bit like being an actor going on stage rather than being filmed in a studio. You're going to have to do a whole heap more to make it translate. So there's a lot about changing behaviors that could have been really subtle and picked up very well in a meeting room. You're going to have to dial it up if you want to get the same on a screen. So I try and help individuals understand the very primitive needs of a mammal brain, and that is acceptance by your social group and looking for visual connection and approval in order to build trust.
How do you mean vision connecting? What does that mean?
Well, for instance, I don't know about you, Jason, you might find it in some of yours, but I'm amazed when I can do a session on the subject of emotional intelligence and communication, and I'll actually have to ask people to put their videos on. And it's kind of, that's a curious starting point, isn't it? Because, you know, we need to be seen. And even, you know, the way we tilt the head, the way we might lean forward, that all builds empathy before we even start using language, which humans have exclusively.
Yeah, I totally agree. The language is the key to connection. And when people's screens are off, you don't know what's going on. You just have to go with your ear and the tonality and how they're speaking. So what do you think the major challenges that people are facing right now in business, and how can we leverage that to make a positive impact?
It's a really good question. I think one of the questions I've noticed coming up a number of times this week is the challenge of how do we bring people back, and how, you know, where do we demand it in order to make sure you do get people turning up for one meeting together? Or how do we not appear like we're being very directive and controlling by making those demands? So, and I think it's also about how do we hang on? We're incredibly adaptable, but equally, how do we hang on to what we've learned before we quickly rush back to the old style? Because there's been a lot discovered, but because it's been in such a threatening environment, it's easy to sort of throw the baby out with the bathwater and rush back to the old ways.
Yeah. So how do you think people are going to get in and embrace difference? Because it is going to be different now. It's not the same as it was. Nothing's going to be like that. And since the Second World War, there was massive change. This time there's massive change, and it's going to affect everyone, but especially seeing in people up there within the organizations that are not prepared for this, even though it's been a year on. So developing people for the future has to happen. So what do you think the key elements for that what they might need to do this, so it will make an impact for the future generations going forward?
In terms of people development?
Yeah, people development, because we're in this people, well, luckily enough, we're in these people development roles where I call soft skills people skills, because they fundamentally are, and we're in that place of people skills. So the change now, what do you think are the key things that we can do to help this along?
Well, this is interesting, isn't it? Because a lot of this will depend on us individually recognizing when we're triggered into feeling threatened. Yeah. So, I mean, we've talked very often as trainers and coaches, haven't we, about know yourself, self-knowing and personal mastery and all that stuff. I don't think there's ever been a time where we need to be more conscious about developing that.
Yeah.
Because if we don't know what's triggering our threat at the moment, we could well miss a huge opportunity. So for rough and tumble, and in that, don't see the fact that what's really happening is they're slightly threatened by perhaps the limitation of being powerful, or perhaps their ego being fed. They may miss a real opportunity of drawing on innovation in perhaps some of their introverts in the team. It takes a lot of courage to be curious, even when it comes to ourselves. So, but it's such an opportunity, I feel, Jason, for businesses to really think differently.
So when people think differently, but what's the challenges when they have a fixed mindset as opposed to an open mindset? A fixed mindset is, as we know, things are always going to be the same. I'm never going to grow. I'm never going to learn. It's probably the blockbuster analogy. We're okay. We're going to stay the way that we are. And hang on a minute, Netflix comes in and sweeps in, and all of a sudden we've got this streaming service. So changing the mindset from the top down.
Well, I'm afraid on the whole, no matter how much we might like it to be different, it does need to happen at the top. You do need to have somebody courageous enough at the top to say, I haven't got all the answers. I need all you folk to help me and help us be successful. And, it's a bit like Amy Edmondson's research in psychological safety. The best teams report the most mistakes. And it feels counterintuitive, but unless you you're courageous enough as a leader to create an environment to ask for help, and you don't ridicule or criticize when mistakes are made, you're not going to have the safe space to really bring about that cognitive diversity, which brings such fruitful ideas.
Yeah. And there's lots of research out there with having different people within the organization, maybe in, I don't know, customer services, maybe in marketing, maybe in something, because different types of people bring that collaborative effort and different ideas from a different mindset. So I was looking at compassionate focused coaching. What does that mean? How does that work? And how do you do that? Or can you and will you give some really good golden nuggets along the way? Because I love to feed forward some wonderful ideas so people can learn and grow when they listen to this.
Well, what we found in, when we're coaching for emotional intelligence development, we often find that those at the top of their game are at the top of their game for very good reasons. They've got high IQ, often have perfectionist tendencies, and have really kind of got to where they are by attainment of various things. unfortunately, that can often be connected to quite a loud self-critic. So the achievement is because of the self-critic rather than despite. And you can get to a point where feeling fulfilled is unattainable because you're just too busy trying to tick the next box. So what compassion-focused coaching does is, first of all, and very importantly, it helps a coach understand where they're at with their own self-critic and start to think about how actually we can perform not only as well but better when we're speaking to ourselves with an internal positive voice. But it also helps recognize when that needs and can be developed in the client, and where one might be closing down the potential of oneself for fear of self-criticism. So it's about working with, as Professor Paul Gilbert would talk about, and anyone can access the Compassionate Mind Foundation's work. He talks about the flow of compassion, and it's a three-way flow: self-compassion, giving compassion out, which most people get, but it's also about letting compassion in, which can be very tricky if you're in a high state of attainment, success, drive, and threat. So there's something about being able to develop focus in a mindful way to notice and then choose the approach you take, rather than continually heightening the bar, and often not being fulfilled when you attain it.
Yeah, no, that's quite interesting. Like the highly driven, highly focused people, because they want success.
Yes.
But the internal dialogue is, they probably have that ego surrounding them, and maybe it's the imposter syndrome not to let go. And that internal dialogue that people tend to have within that fight, flight, or freeze scenario that we all have, which is the reptilian brain in ourselves, that also gives the internal dialogue to our sort of neocortex, which is the rational brain. But talking to that emotional brain, sometimes we have to be let loose a little bit. So how do you think leaders can let go a little bit and communicate a little bit more effectively to their staff or employees?
Well, before they can do the doing, which is what they want to do immediately, because that's what makes them feel like they're active, you've got to really develop that neurological muscle matter to be able to start noticing. So we found it quite tricky to get high performers to practice that noticing mindful work between sessions. So we actually, my stepdaughter and I actually created a product, an online product that's within a VR headset as well. So you can immerse yourself in a scene of nature and plug into an audio that helps you develop those muscles to focus. But it's more of a stepping stone towards mindfulness, because many folk I coach are switched off by the word mindfulness. They kind of, you're going to want me to hum or do something freaky now. So we created something before mindfulness to help them get going, really. So we've been playing with that.
Oh, that's great. No one else I've spoken to date that's spoken about that VR, because I love technology anyway. So I'm straight in there with that.
Yeah.
And I think if you can find a stepping stone, said, what I want you to do is a really simple visualization technique, but you're going to be immersed in this scene and setting. And we know there's a direct correlation between green spaces and water that relaxes and calms you. And especially when you hear crashing waves around you and water trickling and birds humming around, it just calms you down. So that's a wonderful step. I'd like to find out a little bit more about that. Can you tell me more about that?
Of course I can.
How can people use that?
Well, we went live, I think, nearly 12 weeks ago, so it's out there on the internet, and so it's there for the public, and you can kind of go in, and there's a variety of audios around calming, training, or coaching the mind, and you can basically pick an audio and just go for a walk, because real nature's lovely. But you can also, if it's raining or you're just too busy, you can pick a scene of nature out of a library full, and you can decide where you want to be while you listen to your audio. And if you own a VR headset, you can choose to do that on a VR headset, and our clients get a VR headset with their coaching package. So I kind of prescribe audios for the clients, and I kind of say, do you know what, if you've got a really harsh board meeting coming up and you know you're going to be in threat, 6 minutes of this, you'll recenter and you'll be in your best game when you go in there. So and we've done research with Aston University, so we know it works. We've got great findings on it, so it's very exciting.
That's good. That's a nice take on it. And people like shiny objects at times, but if you can connect that with saying, this is wonderful, this is a great way of doing it, lots of research behind it, yes. You can do this step by step, and you will notice the difference in the changes, because it is that James Clear effect, where you do the 1%, and every day after up to 66 days, you build in that habit and form that habit so you can build success. So what do you think, and how do you view success based on the clients that you work with, and based on how you view success in the work that you do?
Oh gosh, success for me is when clients just have that moment and they just say, when you first used to come here, Hilary, you'd be saying stuff and I'd be like nodding, but some of it was just, and then there's suddenly that moment when I suddenly realise, and I feel that the virtual homework between sessions has speeded that process up, because now they're saying, do you know, I've just been in a meeting and I suddenly heard in my mind a short sentence out of an audio I've been listening to, or I suddenly saw the beach that I was looking at. So you get these little anchors to help you stay in your best space. And that's when I know this is why I do this job, because there's nothing more rewarding really than seeing people that realization of, I can manage my mind. It doesn't have to manage me all the time.
Yeah, because it is one of those things, and I like to see the little sparkle in people's eyes when I coach and train people. I like that little glint in the eye that they've got it, and things have shifted. But I'm really quite careful with who I work with, because I want to make sure that they're open, but they're open to change, and they want to change, not that they're just going, well, we're not going to do it. It's something that I suggested before, because we have to try something different every day and find out what works and what doesn't work. And then we get feedback or feed forward how we can do something different next time. So that's how I like to operate.
I love that. Yeah. And actually that fits very well with compassionate mind training, because behind that, it's saying have the intent to be compassionate, but you need to take action towards that intent. It's no good just saying, yeah, I'm going to do this stuff. The actions are so important.
Absolutely. I actually did a post the other day actually on visualization, and everyone that I've interviewed all visualize something or other. If you're an athlete, you visualize winning the race, or you visualize kicking the football into the goal, or whatever it might be, but we're all doing it. But you can train yourself to do this better, but nothing works without action. So a sprinter is visualizing it, and then he's action straight away and he's running. So that's the action. But you can put that into business context as well. You visualize success, or you visualize your goals, or you visualize whatever else, then you take action, and then you move on, because I help people do that, and I think that's really wonderful. Is that something that you work with, or how would you work in those sort of areas?
Well, do you know what, Jason? I didn't that much until I made my mind up about developing your virtual mind trainer. And because I was the only one, I was one with the idea. Everyone else was like, yeah, she's really sort of gone a bit weird now. She's talking about filming things. And and as I was shimming up mountains and taking 360 videos and trying to persuade everyone it would work, I had to vision, I had to vision for myself, and I visioned it being a success, and gradually, and you'll know this if you work with people, but gradually my belief in it, and because I can see it, it attracts other people to want, they're interested, they like the vibe. So and because of that, I now I have that experience, I'm using it more. And I was pondering this morning when I used it with a client, why I haven't used it more often, because it's very liberating.
It is extremely liberating. I use that all the time. And whether I'm meditating in myself, but I'm visualizing the future as if it's already happened, or I'm visualizing connection as if it's already been done. So,
yes.
But then it's linguistically done in my head. So I'm actually doing an affirmation that's kickstarting that as well, to produce positive results, because that's what my intent is, to do positive results and success.
Absolutely.
So if you were interviewing yourself, what sort of questions would you ask yourself?
Oh my Lord. Why did you wait so long to become self-employed, woman? That's what I would ask. Because I've never had so much fun. So yeah, that would be a big question. What stopped you?
Yeah, and that is a massive question for everyone. Could you tell me a little bit more about that? Because that's quite fascinating. When you ask yourself a question, how would you answer it, and what would you need to do to do that?
Well, I'd give the real answer, and it was only me. I stopped myself. I found reasons why it wasn't the right time, or what I didn't have yet, or what I needed to get before. But actually what made it happen, Jason, was that I went into a job which I thought would be, like kind of maybe the last role, and it was at the height of the status I thought would be really important as a last role. And after, I was still within my probation period, when I just thought, I can't stand this anymore. And I came home and just said, I'm done.
Yeah.
I promised not to use the savings, but now's the time. And something just came over me. Just now's the time. That was it, really.
So if you were to give some advice to people, or feed some golden gems, what would they be, just to help people learn and grow in their own world, or whatever they're looking at right now?
This is going to sound so simple, but it isn't. It's listen to your gut and find the power from within. It never comes from something for me, it's never come from something I've acquired or bought or attained. It comes from me saying, you go do it. And that's where being mindful of how we speak to ourselves, what that internal dialogue can make us fly and really enjoy the experience of life, or it can just keep us on a very straight and narrow road. And I never would have ever thought of myself as an entrepreneur, but I've come from being a single parent on benefits 30 years ago, and I know what it's like to have nothing. And I just wish someone had been around. I wish big Hilary could talk to little Hilary and make it have happened earlier. But I only needed to listen to me and believe it.
Yeah, I think that's the best thing that you can learn. And sometimes 30 years ago, you talking to yourself then, you wouldn't have probably listened anyway. You would have probably gone, Yeah, whatever. So what? But it's
Yeah.
only now over experience and self-talk you've learned to grow and learn yourself. And I think that's incredible. So hats off to you. So well done for that. So how can people find out more about you?
Well, I'm on LinkedIn. You just look up my name and you can find me there. And Your Virtual Mind Trainer is on LinkedIn as well. You can look that up. You can go to my websites for both businesses, Indigo Talent Development or Mind Trainer. And you can even log into Mind Trainer and have a month free and just have a go at it. So I'd encourage people just to have a bash, and you can go on it on any device as well as a headset. So you can just do it on your phone. Yeah, it's very simple.
Thank you so much. You've been absolutely awesome and given some golden gems and nuggets, because that's what I like to do, is to feed forward and to help people grow when they need to grow and learn something great and wonderful about what they can do in their lives. So thank you very much for that. You've listened to Jason Cooper and Hilary on a wonderful journey of the mindful leadership. I'm your host, Jason Cooper. I'm a sales relationship coach. I help build wonderful, great relationships for now and the future, which affects the bottom line. So your customers are happy. So you build trust, credibility, and authority around what you do on a day-to-day basis. So I thank you so much.